You are listening to the Thoughts from a Page podcast, which is a member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. My name is Cindy Burnett, and I love to talk about books with anyone and everyone. While listening to my podcast, you will hear author interviews, behind-the-scenes conversations about various aspects of the publishing world, theme discussions with other book lovers, and more. For more book recommendations and a complete list of all of my interviews, check out my website, thoughtsfromapage.com, and follow me on Facebook and Instagram at thoughtsfromapage. In 2022, I would love for you to join my Patreon group. I offer at least 2 bonus episodes a month and a monthly advanced read and pre-publication author chat. For those on Facebook, I host a special Patreon Facebook group where we all chat books. Thanks so much to those who already participate, and I hope you will consider joining us. Today, I am interviewing Ashley Winstead about Fool Me Once. Ashley is an academic turned novelist with a PhD in contemporary American literature. She lives in Houston with her husband, 2 cats, and her beloved wine fridge. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And now for a quick break. For the last year, I have been focusing more on my health and eating habits. In connection with that, I have started drinking AG1 in the morning. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my health and energy levels. That is because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. I recommend AG1 to all of my family and friends because the company has a team of doctors and scientists. It is tested for 950 contaminants and is NSF certified for sport. It is formulated based on the latest science, and it maintains high quality standards. Thanks AG1 for sponsoring my show. AG1 is a supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. That's drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. Check it out. And now back to my show. Welcome, Ashley. How are you today?
I am fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. It's so fun to talk to a fellow Houstonian. That just makes me so happy.
I know. I'm just so thrilled to be plugging into, to be able to meet you over audio and then be plugging into the Houston literary community.
I bet. And as we'll discuss a little bit in the future, you have many books, not just one. So I'm sure that is fun to be thinking about meeting other writers in the Houston community and the genres in which you write.
Yes, I can't wait.
Well, first, why don't you give me a quick summary of Fool Me Once for those that won't have read it yet?
Fool Me Once is my romance debut. It's an enemies to lovers second chance romance. It's set in Austin, Texas, and it's actually the first book that I've ever written set in Texas, which is kind of funny. But it follows Lee Stone, who is 29 years old. She is a total communications badass, like a professional at comms for a female-led electric vehicle company. And she is also an unrepentant party girl. So she's got this kind of like Jekyll and Hyde thing going on where she's both at the same time. And her dream of dreams is to have the ability to campaign for a green energy bill in Texas, of all places. She's just a huge environmentalist. This is something she's always wanted to do. And the book opens with her getting finally the opportunity. She's gotten the go-ahead from the governor, actually, who's going to put his weight and capital behind the bill. The catch is the governor has just hired a policy director to be her campaign partner. And his name is Ben Latterman, and he's this big shot lawyer returning back to Texas from California. And he also just so happens to be Lee's ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago. The one relationship that she just destroyed, ended disastrously, and it was unequivocally her fault. And so now Lee and Ben have to work together on this amazing political project, her dream, despite all of their animosity and very fraught history. They have to work together to kind of make history and see if, any sparks might catch as they kind of campaign around the state, and shenanigans ensue.
I just thought it was such a fun read. I had the best time with it. And I was just curious how you came up with the subject matter, or it's not really matter, because there's green energy, there's the female led electric car company, there's the Disney connection. There were just so many fun aspects. How did you put all that together?
Thank you so much. First of all, that means the world to me. So I've always known second chance romance. It's my favorite trope. I just devour romance novels, and that has always been my favorite. I've always just been very drawn to the idea of redemption and relationships never quite being done. And so I knew I wanted to write a really fraught, tension-fueled romance. And I actually worked here in Houston before I became a full-time author. I worked at a national philanthropy with its office based here in Houston that worked on policy change, actually. So I was doing a lot of the similar work that Lee does in the book. I was a communications director working on passing bills here in Texas, as well as, in other states and at the federal level as well. And there were so many times, I kid you not, like the political antics in Fool Me Once. Sometimes, they're they're almost unbelievable, but I promise you, these are things that are like drawn from real life and actually pale in comparison to some of the behind the scenes political maneuverings that I witnessed in my job. And so I always thought to myself, I wanted to center a character with like really strong political ambitions, because that's just always been part of my personality and part of my girlfriends, like an important thing to my group of girlfriends. And I knew there was so much comedic potential in the world of politics. So those things kind of melded together. And then I'm a huge pop culture nerd. Like I love Disney. I love, there's Captain Planet. There's, all the Disney princesses. I mean, there's so many references in Fool Me Once. And that was just me like delighting myself, invoking all of these things, pop culture things that I love.
My kids love Disney, and we went to Disneyland for the first time in California last August. And they are now dying to get back to Disney World because we went a lot when they were young, but they're now in their 20s and upper teens. And so we hadn't been in a while. And so they're just driving me crazy to go back. And I just had so much fun reading that opening chapter. I truly feel like that is one of the best opening chapters I have read in a long time. I sat down to start reading and I was literally cracking up. And I just loved the whole Disney princess thing and the Disney wedding and the castle and all of it. It was so much fun.
Thank you so much. I mean, I truly thought like, okay, I have this character Lee who does not believe in love, and not just like, oh, she's been burned before, so she's a little bit shy about it. No, she has like done a full 180, just strongly believes, does not believe in true love, romantic love. So what better than to put her in, the epicenter of fairy tale romance, to like put her in a Disney princess costume and have her racing through the Disney park.
With the kids chasing after her.
The kids chasing after her.
I just loved it, all of that. I just literally, I'm like, I think I'm going to have to read that chapter again as we talk about it. It was just so much fun. And I think that's one of the things that I like so much about your book is all of the humor. Obviously the romance was great and I loved your characters, but I also love that you wove in humor the entire way.
Thank you so much. I describe this book as a romantic comedy very heavy on the com, part of the rom-com.
But I think that's great. I loved the green energy aspect, and I loved the idea of a woman running an electrically made car company.
Oh, yes. I mean, my husband is an engineer, so he works for NASA, which is part of why we're here in Houston. And, seeing how few women engineers, even in NASA, within NASA, which tries really hard as an agency to hire women engineers and make sure that they are, sustained in their work and supported, it's just, science and tech remains a really, really hard industries for women to be in. And so my book, I just wanted to be filled with women who were doing really kick-ass things against all odds. And I've had this weird relationship, parasocial relationship, I guess you would say, with Elon Musk, in which there's a lot of jokes in Fool Me Once comparing Elon Musk to Lee and her boss Dakota Young's electric vehicle company, where they're better than Tesla and existed before Tesla, but didn't get as much attention, of course, because they were female led. And so part of that was just me doing kind of making a teasing joke about the fact that Elon started out as someone that I really, really admired. And then he's just had such a rocky, rocky experience in the news, and someone needs to take social media away from him. But just wanted to kind of like play around with the idea of women shattering all kinds of glass ceilings, which they do in Fool Me Once.
I loved that. I just thought it was so wonderful and so aspirational and something we can all hope for.
Thank you.
Are you a native Texan?
No, I am not. So we grew up, my family, I'm a Navy kid. We bounced around from coast to coast thanks to my dad's job every 2 years. And so I like to say I'm from a little bit of everywhere, but I have lived in Texas for 12 years now. It is by far the longest I've lived anywhere. So I've lived a little bit in Austin, in Dallas, and now here in Houston. So I think I should start saying that I'm a Texan.
I think you definitely should. That makes you a Texan for sure.
Yes.
So you have written a thriller that came out last August, which I also loved. In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife.
Yes, thank you.
And now you have Fool Me Once, and then you have another thriller coming out this summer. And then do you have a rom-com again following that thriller?
I do indeed.
Okay, so let's talk about that. 2 thrillers, 2 rom-coms, 2 publishing houses. Can you just tell me all about it?
Yes, so this is what I probably took a lot of people by surprise when I followed up my debut thriller with the announcement that my next book was going to be a romance, a rom-com. But for me, and this is always how I dreamed my career would go, because I've always really wanted to write across genres. The first book that got me agented actually was a contemporary YA fantasy.
Oh, really?
Yes.
How funny is that?
I mean, I feel like it almost feels like every book that I've written is a new genre, which has played out a little bit. That has been true for like the first 3 books that I wrote. So I just am, as a reader, I'm a voracious reader. I love to consume stories across all sorts of different genres and feel a very similar compulsion to write stories in different genres and write in different voices. And I still feel, even though I have a few books under my belt, that I am still figuring out my voice, and still figuring out what it means to be an Ashley Winstead book. And so there are certain themes that I gravitate to, certain character types that I gravitate to, and those actually remain through lines, whether the book's a thriller or a romance. And so I'm actually kind of learning a lot about myself just through the exploration of these books that I'm writing. But it was an incredible learning experience to go from writing a thriller to a romance. I had to learn a lot about the different genre expectations within romance. And those are things that you kind of take for granted. I took for granted as a reader of both thrillers and romance, but then really kind of had to grapple with as a writer. So for example, the likability of characters is a thing that
is much more important in the rom-com than it is in the thriller.
Yes, there's so much leeway when you're a thriller writer to center unlikable characters. And in fact, it's almost an expectation of the genre.
I was just going to say that it is almost an expectation of the genre, because in a thriller, you're not going to have this just happy-go-lucky, super likable person doing all these things that, people aren't going to like. So yes, it almost is the flip. Like you're at 2 ends of the spectrum with thriller and rom-com.
That is exactly it. And as a writer, I've learned about myself that I naturally want to write unlikable characters. Like I am drawn to flawed, messy people who make mistakes and don't just make 1 or 2, but like consistently make mistakes. And I won't go into, maybe what that says about me, but just the fact that that's who I'm drawn to writing. And that worked really well in my thrillers that I've written. And I probably rather naively thought that it could work well in romance as well. And so Lee Stone is, I'm just so loving the thoughts and reflections from early reviews about Lee. And, there was a moment in time where she's a messy, complicated woman who has made a lot of mistakes, who has self-destructive behavior patterns that throughout the course of the book she's unlearning and kind of confronting. And so that to me was a really interesting thing to have in a romance. But there have been a few moments in this publishing journey with Fool Me Once where I've sat back and wondered if maybe I pushed it a little too far. Maybe I pushed the envelope with Lee and made her a little bit too messy, a little bit too sharp. And so that's, I think, one of the things that I'm still learning and calibrating as a romance writer is how to pay heed to the genre expectations and honor them for romance, but maybe challenge and subvert them a little. So I'm basically all of that to say that's been like a great learning experience for me between the two genres. And the other thing that I will say is just, I will put it out there that it is harder to write comedy and harder to write romantic comedy in particular, in my opinion, than it is to write thrillers. And I think the reason is simply that there is just so much inherent hookiness and drama. Here I am inventing words, but all of that is just so built into a lot of thriller premises that involve murder and a lot of really high stakes things are happening. Whereas the stakes of your typical romantic comedy or romances are naturally tend to be a little bit smaller. Now, Lee and Ben are doing something fairly high stakes, like running this statewide political campaign to make history. But still, the heart of the story, like most romantic comedies, is about the relationship between two people. Really, that's it. And the fact, the requirements for a romantic comedy for a writer are that you imbue that smaller scope with just as much tension and interest and, I'm going to use my made-up word hookiness as a book about a serial killer or murder or what have you. And so that was another big challenge for me in making the switch between genres.
Well, first, I really liked Lee. So I don't think anybody should be complaining about her. I thought she was a great character. She was the perfect character for the rom-com that, you wrote her into. I thought it was great. So, and I do think it's nice to kind of press the boundaries a little bit and to push out, because I think that just like any genre or any type of book, you can only do the same thing so many times. So you want that uniqueness and the originality. That's what makes it a better story.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
And then I think with respect to writing them, I think the thriller probably is easier because it's so much easier to write these characters that are going to be doing things that a lot of people probably wouldn't do in real life. And you don't have to worry quite so much about the believability of it, even though that seems backward. But I think in thrillers, that's the whole idea. These people are doing these things that you're like, no, don't do that,
That is so well put. I'm memorizing that. The answer to use later. Yes, that's perfectly put. Is that you have so much more latitude with thriller writing.
I think you do. So that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it, but it makes perfect sense. Well, what in terms of, and of course, I don't mean this to put you in any kind of bind or answer questions about one house versus the other, but what is it like writing for two different publishing houses?
Oh, it is fascinating. So, I adore both equally. It's been such a pleasure. And in fact, we talked to Source Books, which is my thriller publisher, about my kind of I was like, surprise, I wrote a romance, which is also what I said to my agent. so, so basically it was a lot of hey, I've done this thing.
Guess
hope
what?
this is okay. Yeah, exactly. And so they were like, oh, that's so lovely. And we're like, And so we really had Sourcebook's blessing to kind of go outside and submit my romance to other publishers. So it's been a very happy and kind of like lovely multiple relationship with different publishers. And so, of course, I was fortunate enough to land with Graydon House, part of HarperCollins. And actually, my editor at Graydon House, Kat Klein, she used to work at Sourcebooks. And so there's just a lot of fun kind of connections there, like feels like one big family. And so, but it has been very fun to just see how the two different publishing houses do things differently. And yeah, I feel really blessed to kind of have this unique experience between the two.
I do think that it is a unique experience for you because you're able to see how two different places do it, learn different things from each of them, and so as you're moving along, you're like, oh, okay, I learned this from Sourcebooks, I learned this from Graydon House, and I think that's great. And I think that experience of a house wanting to focus on a particular genre with an author seems to be very common. I mean, I see when people are writing multiple genres, especially initially like you're doing, that it's very common for them to be publishing with different places.
Oh, yeah, it made so much sense. And in fact, we were actually thinking there was a solid week where my agent and I assumed that I would be inventing like a new persona for my romance career.
Oh, right.
That I would have a new name and like a new website, and all of that was a little bit daunting to me. And so we went back and forth, and we actually got down to the granular level of coming up with pseudonyms, and which is a very telling, illuminating experience.
It's got to be hilarious because there's such like, I don't even know what you want to call it, branding of names for whatever you're going to be writing.
Yes, that is the perfect way to describe it. And you learn a lot about yourself when people ask, what is it that you want to be called when you get the opportunity to change your own name. And this is me telling on myself, but I'll say it anyway. I found myself gravitating toward like androgynous and slightly masculine names. And my agent commented on that, like, oh, all of these are androgynous names, like Brett and blah, blah, blah. I liked Brett Ashley for the Hemingway nod,
Yes.
and because it incorporated my real first name. But so I had a list of that, like Sloan, so blah, blah, blah. And my agent kind of pressed on that. And I wrote her back and I said, well, because I feel like these names have kind of an edginess and a coolness to them. And I swear to you, as soon as I press send, I realized exactly what I was saying, which was like this very internalized misogyny in which I was like gravitating towards more masculine or androgynous names because I thought they were cooler and sharper. And why in the world can't, a super feminine name be just as cool and sharp and edgy? So that was a thing I learned about myself and then like retracted immediately with my agent. So a learning experience. But in the end, we decided I would be Ashley Winstead just across all genres. So in the future, when you see like my middle grade and YA, this is me joking.
And your sci-fi.
Yeah, my sci-fi.
Yeah, she does it all. Well, I have to tell you, I am so happy that you stayed with Ashley Winstead because I find it, I don't know, it's a little baffling to me that people have to change their name if they're writing a different genre, but it's also confusing because then if I'm talking with you about one book and I'm calling you Ashley and then I have to talk with you about another book and you're suddenly Sloan or Brett, then, it becomes a much more confusing conversation. I just think it's wonderful that you're staying with Ashley. Everybody knows you're writing different books and who cares?
I could not agree with you more. And also, can you imagine how confused I would also get?
Yes.
Trying to figure out, like, I'm sure I'd talk to my therapist, like, I am having an identity crisis. Who am I? Am I Sloan? Am I Ashley? I don't know. No, I would just mess that up so much. I also do think that as more authors do what I'm doing,
yes,
I'm thinking of like Jesse Sutanto and other writers who are just writing across so many different genres and keeping their name and just saying like, look, I write a lot of different things. I think there's more room in the industry now for that. And those ideas that we used to have that, oh no, you will trick your reader into buying a book in a genre and then disappoint them and yada yada, which was, I guess, some of the logic behind
Right.
having synonyms. I just really don't think that exists anymore.
Well, and I think there are a couple of things. I think one, we have the internet. So it is so much easier to look up what a book's about, to find out more information. So, if I'm tricked about a book, it's because I didn't do my own research. You can read about it on the cover, but you can also dive into it. But also, I think that idea of a pseudonym long time ago was when, say, I wrote under Cindy Burnett and my books didn't do very well. And so then I'm going in a different direction. I'm trying a new genre. They want to rebrand me because they don't want my name associated with my earlier not great success. And I think that some of it started that way as well. And if you're doing all of this at the same time, then it shouldn't matter at all. And anyway, it was a silly idea, I think, to have everybody changing their names. But if they're going to, that's fine. But if you're writing in August your thriller and now this rom-com and then a thriller again, I mean, it's going to be so confusing to be trying to toggle back and forth when it's all happening in real time.
Oh, yes. And you're so right about that other reason. And I would like to formally reserve the right to adopt a pseudonym if my career crashes and burns in the future.
I'll see a name, author Sloane Ashley, and I'll be like, I know who that is.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That's funny. Well, I love titles and covers. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your beautiful cover. I'm hoping those stars are a nod to Texas.
Yes, they are. Oh my gosh, the cover process was so much fun for Fool Me Once. And I will confess that the original title that I am still slightly sad is not the final title was Stoner, which is of course the nickname
right
for Lee Stone. And I loved, so the original title was Stoner, a Love Story. And I was very delighted by that, but for reasons that are probably pretty obvious to everyone, Graydon House said, we probably need to change the name of this rom-com.
I don't think that's going to work so well for your rom-com. Yeah.
People are definitely going to get different ideas about what this book is about.
That's hilarious.
Yes. And so we went through a very long and drawn out process of coming up with different titles. So I've joked a lot about the fact that in my dreams, I Hold a Knife title process was long and drawn out. This doubled that. It took us a very long time to settle on Fool Me Once. Very happy with where we landed ultimately, but yeah, that was a bit of a struggle. I won't lie, to find a new title. But the cover process. So I had so much fun sending covers, cover samples of other covers that I loved to the cover designer and my team at Graydon House. And we had these really fun Zoom calls where we just pulled up images and threw them up on the screen. And everyone was talking about how to both we knew that we went back and forth a lot between illustrated cover versus photographic cover. And I'm sure you don't want me to talk as much as I could talk about this, but within the romance world, as you know, the field, the cover signals so much, as it does for all covers, but it's almost a little more fraught within the romance world. And since Fool Me Once is definitely a romance, but it's also got really strong women's fiction vibes to it, if I'm allowed to say the word vibes to talk about genre, we ultimately decided that we didn't want a picture of a couple or an illustration of a couple on the cover, and that we wanted to kind of pare it back and keep it a little more abstract. And what we did is we went and looked at a lot of famous collage art, especially from Austin, because Austin has, of course, those really famous collages all over the city that people take pictures with. So we pulled a lot of those images and sent them to our amazing cover designer and illustrator. And they came up with the beautiful cover of Fool Me Once, which takes those Texas stars and it takes the script. Actually, that Fool Me Once script is something that they developed based on mural art in Austin. So I just love it. I think it's so cool.
I'm just not a fan of those illustrated covers at all. So I was very happy to see this. It's a cute rom-com. It's a wonderful cover. It just looks so cartoony to me, and I just really don't like it. So I was very happy to see this.
Yeah, it's such a fraught conversation, and that
It
feels
is.
like the stakes are so high trying to figure out, how to communicate to the world about what your book is about, because you know that everyone has very strong opinions about it. You're like, don't want to make a misstep. But yeah, no, I'm thank you for saying that. I'm really happy with how the cover turned out.
And I love that. I guess orange, was that what you would call it? Because it's not peach because it's brighter, but whatever that background color is, it's beautiful.
Yes, thank you. One of the things I said was that I loved brightly colored books. Of course, Dreams appropriately is a black background book, but I just love bright rom-coms. They make me happy. And in my head, Fool Me Once is a very sunshiny book. And so I love that that's reflected in that really bright, kind of like punch you in the face orange of the cover.
It's perfect. So I think it turned out really well. And I love the second chances are for suckers.
Thank you.
A little tagline there.
I actually came up with that. Yes. And I'm very proud of myself. That's like my best marketing win of all time.
Oh, that's really fun. Well, and I don't know what this says about me, but literally this week I have said no to 3 different books because I look at the cover and I'm like, I just can't even post that cover. I can't even look at the cover while I'm reading. So I have just been like, sorry. And I can't say that back to the publicist. So I'm just like, yeah, I'll pass on this one. So, but I just am like, oh, so I just sometimes wish that there was a little more, I don't know. I guess that will say it all, but I just am like, I can't read that book. I cannot even abide the cover.
Well, now I know you can't say, but now I want to like DM you later to
Yes,
find out
exactly.
what those covers are. You know what's so fun though? Sourcebooks does this amazing thing where they actually test out, they do consumer testing on covers before the final cover selection.
Oh, that's very cool. I wonder how I could get on their list to do that.
Yes, and so they do it through social media. I truly hope I'm not sharing like trade secrets. I don't think I am. If if I am, I'm sure I'll be hearing from Sourcebooks' lawyer. But no, they it's so cool because you, as the author, you go through the whole process that feels like your kind of normal cover process, but where you land is with a few different options that you really like, and then they take those and they go to Facebook and I think Instagram, a few other social media sites, and they have this curated list of people like tastemakers or people who are in their like early reads book club book lists, and they just see what kind of engagement the different options get. And I just think that that is such a cool way to solicit feedback before you kind of finalized. Exactly to your point, in that you wish there was more of a feedback mechanism for covers.
Definitely. Oh, that's so fascinating. Okay, I'm going to have to see if I can get on their list.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I would love to hear what you've read recently that you really liked.
Oh my gosh, this gonna have to put a time limit on me because there's nothing that I love more than reading and recommending books. So I'll start with books that are out now. I am obsessed with A Brush with Love by Mazey Eddings. I don't know if you have heard of it, but it just came out last month in March. And it is this absolutely adorable, but also very steamy romance about 2 dental students. And Mazey is just like an incredible person, as well as a really talented author. And there's really beautiful representation, neurodivergence representation within the book, as well as anxiety and depression representation. So she just does it all very beautifully. I also I'm a sucker for Pride and Prejudice retellings.
Me too.
Yes. Have you read A Certain Appeal by Vanessa King?
No, I'm not even sure I've heard of it.
Oh my goodness, Cindy. I cannot recommend this enough. So it's a modern day Pride and Prejudice set in a New York City burlesque club.
Oh.
It's so good though. It's so good.
Okay, good. I'm going to have to look it up.
Yes. And then, so I'm very fortunate since I write thrillers and romance that I get sent both kinds of books to read early. And so if I can just like shout out some upcoming reads that
definitely
people should keep an eye out for, the debut talent in 2022 is just incredible. So books I've read recently that are just standouts to me are How to Fake It in Hollywood by Ava Wilder. And this is a fake dating trope. 2 actors, one former A-list, one kind of washed up, still rising star whose publicist puts them together in a fake dating scheme to revive both of their careers. It is so beautiful. I cannot rave enough about this book. It's out in June. Check it out. As Seen on TV by Meredith Schorr, which is also out in June, is just absolutely phenomenal. And it takes the like hallmark trope of a big city girl going to a small town to fall in love with, a small town handyman kind of character and just flips it on its head. And it's so much fun. So that's As Seen on TV.
And I love Meredith. She's so nice.
Oh my gosh. I adore her. Just another gem of a human on top of being like a writing talent. And then there's A Very Typical Family by Sierra Godfrey. And this is a family drama with a very endearingly eccentric main character who reminds me a lot of the main character in The Cactus. If you are familiar with that book, it was a Reese Witherspoon book club book. And so essentially it's kind of a darkly funny family drama about a woman. I'm laughing just describing the premise, but a woman who kind of accidentally got her siblings jailed when she was a teenager. And obviously things haven't gone well for them since. And now she's trying.
Since then, right?
Yeah, she's trying to reconcile.
Okay, that's hilarious.
Yes, it's so, and the humor is just that like darkly funny, dry, witty humor that I love so much. It's so good. And so those are just some like absolutely standout debuts that are coming up this summer and fall.
Well, great. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for both the book recommendations and for chatting about Fool Me Once. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on the Thoughts from a Page podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy. I had a blast.
From DNA testing to the Dixie Mafia, Crime Capsule brings you new stories of true crime in American history. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. Join us for exclusive interviews with authors from Arcadia Publishing, writing the hottest books on the most chilling stories of our country's past. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts or on evergreenpodcasts.com. Crime Capsule. History so interesting, it's criminal.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. If you like this episode, and I hope you did, please follow me on Instagram at Thoughts from a Page. Consider joining my Patreon group to access bonus content and support the podcast. Tell all of your friends about the show and rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it. The book discussed in this episode can be purchased at my bookshop storefront, and the link is in the show notes. I hope you'll tune in next time.
From DNA testing to the Dixie Mafia, Crime Capsule brings you new stories of true crime in American history. I'm your host, Benjamin Morris. Join us for exclusive interviews with authors from Arcadia Publishing, writing the hottest books on the most chilling stories of our country's past. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts or on evergreenpodcasts.com. Crime Capsule. History so interesting, it's criminal.